you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Okay, and with that, we will say good morning, grand rising to all who are on the program listening. Welcome to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Contact numbers are 516-453-9921 or the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. Chat room is open also, and if I get a chance, maybe I can take a question or two, and maybe not. But thank you for listening. Thank you very much. On the line now, live from Washington, D.C., is Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Mr. Fuller, good morning, and how are you?
Good morning. I'm still learning.
Okay. All righty. Let's kick off today's program with this. This comes from Bookstore for Justice. Says this, greetings, Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, one problem among people of the known universe is lack of understanding about reason for existence, non-existence. What do you mean when you say existence, non-existence?
Well, everything exists. That exists has a reason for existing. And the things that are non-existent have a reason for being in non-existence. They don't exist. Or at least in the form that creatures in the form of people can understand. There are things that people are born, creatures are born, trees come up out of the ground, water comes from somewhere. Water once didn't exist. You can logically make that presumption. So what is all of this about? Everything, all of the trillions and trillions, some say, of planets that exist. The people will never know anything, the people of the planet Earth will never know anything about, but they exist. So what do they exist for? So it comes down to if you're talking about creatures in the form of people who are on the planet Earth, what is the planet Earth for? And what are the creatures that are on planet Earth for? Including people, along with all of the ants, and the different species of birds, the different type of trees, the grains of sand, the specks of dust. Existence, these things exist, or something we call existence. So what is it all for? So I came to the conclusion that when I started writing the textbook for victims of white supremacy, that, well, it's all for whatever it is that they are for, and we really don't know what everything is here for, but we can speculate. We can go with what we have been told by different philosophers and people who say that they can look into the future and look into the past, historians, archaeologists, certainly ministers of all different types of arrangements that we call religious faiths. And they say, well, we're here for this, we're here for that. So I just came to the conclusion out of all of this confusion, of which there's a great abundance in every area of activity, of things that do exist in the minds of creatures called people anyway. Lots of confusion. So you try to deconfuse, try to make some sense out of all of it. And so I just came to the, you might say, quote, unquote, primitive conclusion that we're here to solve problems. Because the creatures, the things that move, unlike rocks and what they call inanimate objects, things that move, ants, birds, people, even leaves, they move. So what is it all about? How do you put it all together and say, now this is what it's really all about? This is the truth of the matter. Everybody's got their opinion, but what is it really all about? So using what we call logic, what feeble logic we creatures call people have, you can reasonably come to the conclusion that we're here to solve problems. Well, what's a problem? Well, it's an inconvenience of some sort, something that disturbs you, something that doesn't seem like it should be, that something else should be in its place. And so these things are called problems. So existence may be, for people at this particular time in the history, quote unquote, of the known universe, might be the people of planet Earth, as it is called, are here to solve problems in the best possible manner and going about doing it in the best possible manner. So that was at least the genesis of what I have written, because what I have written is centered on one main problem to start with, out of all the thousands of problems that need to be solved, maybe millions, I don't know. You know, problems keep coming.
Mm-hmm.
So, therefore, our existence is to solve problems, and right now, in what we call the manufactured year, 2021, we say, you might say, we're here to solve the problem of racism. And then we go into the details of what it is and what it isn't and the characteristics of it. Why? Because it motivates people to be the way they are more than any other quote-unquote problem among the people of the planet.
All righty. Okay. All right, Bookstore for Justice, we got you in there. Let's go to the phone lines, and let's go to the 443 area, and that will be Brother Muko. Brother Muko, good morning. We got you in here. Thank you for waiting. For the last couple of weeks, you've been waiting. Thank you, brother.
How you doing, Mr. Fuller, Mr. Bobby?
Good, sir.
Morning. I have like a VGQ and a question from Mr. Fuller. My VGQ first is, you know, I wear a lot of codified wear with messages on them or suggestions, as you say, Mr. Fuller. And one of my shirts say, non-white cannot practice racism, white supremacy as hard as they try, no matter how hard they try. That's what my shirt says. And I'm starting to notice when I wear my shirts that a lot of non-whites have a problem with the usage of the term non-white. And it's crazy. It's crazy to me because I've never seen this before, but in Baltimore, here in Baltimore, Maryland, I see it a lot. A lot of non-white people have problems with the term. Now, what I wanted to ask you, Mr. Fuller, is for my care unit in Baltimore and all around, can you explain the importance of race classification?
Well, the racial classifications that I suggest that people use, people can use any classifications they want. Anybody that has problems with non-white, then a question is raised, what term would you use? you think will help solve the problem. Because it all comes down to there's just a word, it's just a term. So you look in that toolbox and see, if you don't like the term non-white, I'll just say that right out. Just say, well, I came up with a manufactured term that nobody never heard of that I think is just appropriate, that will do the job. Because when you're looking for a tool, and a word is nothing but a tool, you pick the tool that will do the job in the best possible manner. That's what any carpenter will tell you, any bricklayer, any person working in a factory. What tool works best? So you get whatever tool and put it out there. You don't know it until you try it and see if it really gets the job done that needs doing once you make up your mind what job needs to be done. So I say that there are 3 classifications of, when you start talking about racial classifications of people of the known universe, and I stick with them so far because I haven't found anything that I think would work better, at least for me, and I hope for others, and that is white, non-white, and white supremacists. And you have to be white in order to be a white supremacist. So functionally, you have 2 basic classifications, but for the extent of courtesy and reality and truth, you might have some white people, and it's logical to think so, who are not racist. So they wouldn't be white supremacists. They're white, just like you have black people who look white, quite a number of them, all over the planet, in our so-called family structures and whatnot. Every black person, extended family structures, where the core members, quote unquote, maybe you might say, sure enough black, but they'll have some cousins who, many of them will tell you, yeah, I got a cousin over here, over there, and whatnot, and he or she looks exactly like a white person. When I first met them, when I was a little boy, a little girl, I thought they were white, but they're family members, and they don't look nothing like me. I'm real dark, and so you hear a lot of people say that, and they're telling the truth. So what is white? How white is white? How white do you have to be in order to be white? See, the white supremacists invented this stuff, so they got the answers to all those questions. Nobody has the answers like they do because they invented all these classifications. So we're just reacting to their invention. And so I reacted to it by saying, well, it'll simplify it for me by saying, we'll have 3 categories because non-white means basically you're black, even though you're a shade of black. If you're brown, that's a shade of black, or shades of shades of shades of black. Brown, red, yellow, beige, tan, or someone who looks exactly like a white person is still black. We see many of the people who are called some of the staunchest, quote unquote, black leaders who look like they could be something other than what you might call sure enough black. Malcolm X, I understand, was called by some of the people he grew up with and by some white people a pink poodle. He said because when he was real young, his hair was kind of pinkish, skin color, or something. But that's Malcolm X. And I don't think anybody would start a big argument about Malcolm X not being what you call a real black person. I don't think most black people look at him that way or see him that way. Mm-hmm. But Malcolm X is basically what you call a light-skinned black person. Mm-hmm. So what are all these classifications really about? See, the white supremacists have done a job on us that is unbelievably efficient. So that we're the most confused people that ever existed on any planet, in my opinion. They have done a wonderful job on us. And we're around here fighting about this and arguing about this and the white supremacists sit back and laugh like you wouldn't believe and say, how can people be so incredibly stupid?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they rub it in.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Muko, and I don't have to tell you, don't be a stranger. You already know. Thank you for your call. Moving on here, Mr. Fuller. Let's do this here. Oh, okay. We'll go off the page here. Let me get back on here. This comes from Gigi. Haven't heard from her for a long time, but she says, Mr. Bobby, can Mr. Fuller define mistreatment in the context that he uses the word?
Well, mistreatment has to be, it's always comparative, like everything. Everything is, when two boxers get into a ring and one punches the other and knocks him across the place and flattens him out on the canvas. Now, how is that looked at? Is he being mistreated, he or she? And the way they look at it is, no, I'm not being mistreated. This is the game. Say, well, this person just hit you harder than you ever been hit, harder than most people ever get hit in their entire life. I mean, you took a punch that was unbelievable. You should be dead. They say, yeah, I mean, I was groggy and laying out on the canvas, and I was out for 2 days, unconscious. Thought I wasn't going to live, but I'm back, and I'm going to get back in the ring. And hey, this is a part of the contract, whatnot. I'm a boxer. Hey, yeah, but wouldn't you consider that to be mistreatment? No, Well, suppose a law enforcement officer hits you like that. Well, then that's a different situation. They say, what? Have you ever been hit by a law enforcement officer with a club or something like that? Say, no, never been hit at all. Get along fine with law enforcement officers. I mean, they're part of my supporters. They're all around the ring when I fight. I mean, I'm an ordinary policeman myself. No, none of them ever hit me. Once they recognized who I was, a famous boxer, say, no, they escorted me, back and forth, even when I didn't ask for an escort. You say, well, this sounds crazy. Say, well, hey, you asked me about mistreatment. No. I don't say, no, I don't know. That guy that hit me in the ring and I was out for 2 days, he wasn't mistreating me. He was just doing his job. So what's the beef? What's your problem? Okay? So in answer to the question, what is mistreatment? Mistreatment is something you perceive as mistreatment. So you can just simply say, sir, I believe that what you're doing now, or ma'am, is mistreating me. And then you explain what you think the mistreatment is. That's all. And you try to come to a conclusion where the mistreatment, what you think is mistreatment, another person might say, well, yeah, the person said that to me. I don't consider that no mistreatment. They didn't mistreat me. They say, well, I consider what they said to me the other day at the office. I think I'm being mistreated. And everybody around the table might say, what? Why do you say that's mistreatment? That's what we do around here. You have to understand our culture. That's not mistreatment. See, but it's mistreatment to you. So when you think that there's some mistreatment, you tell someone, well, I consider this to be mistreatment. When you talk like that to me, I consider that to be a form of mistreatment. And then the person, if they do not believe in mistreatment of people, that's their opportunity to straighten that out. Say, oh, well, I didn't mean any kind of mistreatment. I did say that. So, no, I didn't mean, So if you think that that's mistreatment, what do you want me to do? See, it goes into the wants. Why do you want me to do it? How do you plan for me to do it? Tell me how you want me to talk to you. And then we'll go from there. and produce a constructive result. Because every interaction between people is all about what, or should be, producing a constructive result.
Yes. All right, Gigi, thank you for your Gmail, and do not be a stranger. Before we move on here, I want to say good morning, or grand risings, excuse me, to Sean Glenn, JJ, Let's Get On Code, and Twins Anye. I guess that's how you pronounce it, T.S. Anye, all in the chat room. If I mess that up, just type it out so I can learn how to say that properly. Okay, let's go to the phone line. We're going to go to the Bronx. I believe we are to the 646, and that would be Gregory. Let me see if I can get you in here. Okay, you are on, Gregory. Good grand rising to you.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Yes, sir.
Hope you guys are well this morning. Yes, I will be speaking on the topics of royalism, racial showcasing, child abuse, as well as it'll come to me. I forgot. But this has to do with the story of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. Now, on Sunday, there was an interview with the couple with Oprah Winfrey about their time in the royal family. 2 years ago in 2019, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry married into the English royal family, and it was at the time promoted as a Cinderella story, a black female Cinderella marrying into the royal family, living happily ever after. Now, obviously, since then, it has been anything but that. They have been the subject. Primarily, Meghan has been the subject of mistreatment by the English royal family, as she states, being mistreated by the English tabloids, much to do with her race. Some of the treatment that she's gotten, other members of the royal family, such as Kate, hasn't received, who is white. Now, they've, as she states, they've asked her about, how dark will the baby be? And just other racist treatment by the English royal family. Now, she's obviously not a member of the royal family because although she has a white father, she's still considered non-white because she has a black mother. But I wanted to ask also, do you see her being married into the royal family as an act of racism on the part of Prince Harry because he initiated this interracial relationship? And as a child in the system of white supremacy, Meghan didn't know any better. She thought that she would be living happily ever after, with the royals, being accepted. But obviously that hasn't happened. And I just see a lot of your teachings in this story, and I just wanted to know your opinion about it.
According to the code, counter-racist code, and counter-racist logic, which is what codification is supposed to be based in, logic, non-white people in the system of white supremacy are prisoners of war, victims of white supremacy, no matter where they are or who they associate with. And their prison uniform is their skin color. And or, if it's not directed to skin color, because there are a lot of real light-skinned black people who look white, but if you're classified as non-white, you are born a prisoner of war. You're born in captivity. And you remain that. That is your title. You don't have any real other title other than victim of white supremacy. That's the title. That's the title that I carry every day. Any other title that somebody hangs on me, that's just window dressing. That doesn't mean anything. Any name that I have, I'm nameless. I'm a victim of white supremacy. That is my badge. That is my lifetime title. That is the only title that I can have, a prisoner of war title, as long as the system of white supremacy dominates the planet and that is the system that does dominate the planet. There's no other system. So the system of white supremacy itself is royalism at its most powerful. That's what it is. Racism is the most powerful form of royalism. Now, people may say Belgium royalism, Norwegian royalism. You might say the royal chief in some tribe called Indian or some tribe called African, and royal this and royal that. No, this is one real royal system. And that's the royalty that goes with being a white supremacist. Every white supremacist is royal. Nobody else is. Every white supremacist on planet Earth is royal. Every white person who believes in and practices white supremacy is a royal person. And every non-white person on planet Earth, according to logic, is a victim of white supremacy. Otherwise, you can't say that there's any such thing as white supremacy. That's what it means. It's a scary term. Most black people cringe and don't want to even hear the term, don't want to even think about use of the term. I spent years trying to get people to use the term. Why? Because it's the truth. If someone is beating you down and tells you what to do and where to go and how to think and all like that, and you're doing it, that person is supreme over you. If when you get ready to eat or walk across some land, across some ocean, you have to get permission with your dark skin, your badge, your prison uniform, from someone who is classified as white, you are a victim of white supremacy. If you ask for an education, I want to be educated. The white supremacist says you're not going to be educated unless you come by me. I have hoarded all the knowledge. And not only that, I have hoarded you. You're under me. So if you're going to learn anything, you're going to learn it from me, either directly or indirectly, even if you learn it from another black person that I taught. So that's what it means. And so when you start talking about royalty, you don't have to start scratching your head, because that's what the white supremacists always want black people to do. Stand around scratching their head forever.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fuller. We got to cut that off. Thank you, Gregory, for your call. Do not be a stranger. Okay, you are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am the co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, you can call this number, 516-453-9921. Let me say that again, 516-453-9921. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. Chances are it won't be read today, but you can Gmail me there. Also, the chat room is available. You can get on that, and you can read the chats, stay in contact with the show, and I think that you will be more than, you'll like that more than likely. And occasionally I'll get a chance to read one. But we thank you for your listenership. Okay, again, 516-453-9921. In about 15 minutes, Mr. Fuller will explain about his book and any information about the Carl Nelson Show, which we like to hear. Any information about that and all the information about his book and publications. That's coming up in about 15 minutes. Okay, back to the Gmails. Let's do this. This comes from, let's see, M. Lagacy. M. Lungisi. Okay, I believe it's from South Africa. But anyway, says this, Mr. Fuller, good morning. I hope that you are well. Mr. Fuller, does the code make a distinction concerning the punishment of a person who commits murder in a spur of the moment and a person who plans to murder over a period of time? Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Best regards from South Africa.
No, there's no distinction. A person should have a tendency not to murder. But in the system of white supremacy, murder is glorified. Most books that are published in the English language in the system of white supremacy are about murder, glorifying murder. Stack them up there. Stack them all the way up to the moon. Books, expensive books. Murder here, murder there. Bodies all over the place. All about different ways of killing. The body in the attic, the headless corpse. Murder on the Orient Express. Murder, 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 murder. And then the white supremacists, being the greatest actors and actresses in the world, look aghast, look shocked at the behavior of black people who kill each other all the time. Well, they have been nurtured by the glorification of killing. All of the books. I mean, hey, you what do you want to be? I want to be a knight. Well, what do knights do? Do they produce anything? Do knights build anything? Do they farm the land? What do knights do? Oh, they ride around with shiny armor and a sword or two or three or a lance. Well, swords, daggers, lances. What's that for? Oh, that's to harm people. Harm people? You're glorifying somebody who's just riding around all day looking for somebody to harm? Yeah. It's a part of our heritage. And we want all you dark people to have great respect for it. Go to school and learn all about it. I'll set up the schools for you. And you praise people like that back in history. And then you learn to imitate it yourself. I'll give you a few trinkets and a few guns and whatnot, to play with, as long as you're not harming us. And you can, drink the liquid that I give you, and you can use the drugs that I give you, and you can start the kind of arguments that I have put in your mind about what to value and what not to value. And you can kill each other, and I'll sit back and enjoy the sight. And I'll do this all over the world, from Johannesburg to Chicago. Black people slaughtering each other. And the white supremacists sit back and look at the show and say, now they make a big fuss about George Floyd. And while George Floyd is taking the knee on his neck, there are 300 black people somewhere, 400, 500, 2,000, slaughtering each other. About what? About what I taught them to slaughter each other about. But they don't know that I taught them that. They don't know that that's what they worship. But they are in a world that I have glorified murder. So in answer to the question, hearing about somebody killing somebody else here in 2021 all over the world, just hearing about somebody doing that should be unbelievable. Everybody in the world here in 2021, according to the code, should be saying, you know, I heard a rumor about a person killing a person about 40 years ago. That's what we should be talking right now. And I don't know who's starting these rumors, but somebody's doing this. And that person should be arrested for starting these rumors, because a person killing a person, we haven't done that for thousands of years. This is 2021. Nobody has done that. We used to hear about it. I heard about it. I mean, you know, when I was in elementary school, a person killing a person deliberately about something called an argument. And everybody looked around and said, what's he talking about? Yeah, I was looking around. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe anybody would ever do anything like that. How does the mind work to do something like person killing another person? I've heard of people, you know, slaughtering animals. Well, we don't do much of that anymore. You know, we're vegetarians.
Mm-hmm.
But my goodness, a person killing a person? Nah.
Okay.
No, I don't believe that ever happened. That's the way we should be talking in answer to your question.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. All right, my brother from South Africa, we appreciate that. And you don't have to be a stranger on the Gmails, too. Coming up after this call will be a question about black fraternities, black Greek fraternities and sororities. But before we do that, we're going to go way out to Oakland, California, and in the 510, and I guess it's Palestine, at least that's what it says here. We'll give it a call. Go ahead. You're on with Mr. Fuller. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller. The name is Palestine.
Oh, okay. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. And also, just first, thank you so much, Mr. Fuller. I'm so grateful for the code. I've been reading it the past few months, and it's been helping me change my life, and for the better. So, to the question. Reflecting upon the higher rates of violence enacted upon non-white transgender people and homosexuals. In 2013, 67% of hate homicides were committed against non-white transgender women. And the way white supremacy attacks and dismisses non-white people that discriminate and harm these vulnerable groups as primitive, ignorant, and dangerous. Is it possible that white supremacy is using non-white people's gender and sexuality to confuse and manipulate us, not by degenderization, as mentioned in the counter-racist code, but by creating social constructs that must be strictly adhered to, like man or woman, thereby replacing the more diverse ways of being that have existed throughout the known natural world and that non-white people have practiced predating white supremacy, such as the Fa'afafini of the Polynesian islands of Samoa, the Nkoli of Uganda, the Kwaralani of the Incas, and the Hydra, which is a third recognized gender in India. And to quote you, Mr. Fuller, justice is to help those who need the help the most. Justice is to help those who need help the most receive the most constructive help. Thank you.
Were you making a statement, or is there a question in there somewhere?
Oh, there is a question. I could read it again.
Hello?
The question. Hello. So the question is, if we are to look at the higher rates of violence committed against non-white transgender and gay people, and then the way white supremacists attacks the non-white people who discriminate and harm transgender and gay people as primitive and ignorant and dangerous, is it possible that white supremacy is like pinning us against each other with and also like using it to confuse us pretty much, like you suggest? Our sexuality, could it be that our sexuality and gender is being used to confuse us, but not through degenderization, because gender diversity has existed in history throughout like all of nature and throughout all of human culture since the beginning of time. So yeah, the the question would be is looking at the way reality is, transgender people being murdered at higher rates than specifically non-white transgender people being murdered at higher rates than everyone else, and then white supremacists punishing non-white people who discriminate against gender diverse people, transgender people. I hope that's more clear.
If I understand the question, I think it is basically, do the white supremacists manipulate black people in the area of sex in such a way that they do harm to each other? Is that what you're saying? Is that the question?
Wait a minute. Yeah, is that the question? Yes or no?
So.
Please, because we're up against time, ma'am, and I hate to do that, but we are up against time. So to expedite the question,
right.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, if it's not by degenderization, you mentioned degenderization, if that's not actually how they're confusing us, if they're confusing us by saying, look, by taking how everything has always existed and then being like, you need to be either this or this, and then when we can't do that, and we start like hating each other for it and being violent against each other, they also use that against us. Is that how they're actually doing it, as opposed to this idea that you have mentioned in your book, degenderization? Do you think there's any weight to what I'm saying, considering the higher rates of violence against transgender people?
Everything that the white supremacists do in the area of sex or in the area, any other area, first of all, is to confuse non-white people, and with the purpose of having them be harmed and or harm each other. If I understand the question, yes, everything that they do. So that makes it simple. Just go right to the point. The white supremacists, when they make any move where they interact with non-white people, either directly or indirectly, in any area of activity, it is to do harm, even when it looks like they are doing something that is constructive. They'll do 5 things that are constructive and 50 things that are non-constructive. They know how to mix that up, so that when you'll sometimes the things that are very constructive will stand out, very bold. The things that are non-constructive will not stand out, but they will be very effective because they are very numerous in doing harm, if not immediately, in the long run. And that's also in the area of sex. They do everything in the area of sex where non-white people are concerned to cause, first of all, confusion. And then they use that confusion to do harm, because anytime you confuse people, you're doing harm, but then they do greater harm through the initial purpose of doing something that will cause some type of confusion. And then they feed off of that. Mm-hmm. And have non-white people do harm to each other. So everything will be on automatic.
All right. Mr. Fuller, thank you for your response to that question. And let me just say this. We're going to have new rules here. And this is going to be the new rules. We're going to try this out. When you, I'm going to give maybe a 5-minute window. I'm going to give you a minute to ask your question or your VGQ. And then I'm going to give Mr. Fuller 4 minutes to answer. That way we can keep the program moving, because oftentimes some of the messages or your statements may be a little confusing, or we have to repeat it, and it slows down the show. So the new rules are going to be, when you have a question for Mr. Fuller, I'm going to give you a minute to ask your question, and I'm going to give Mr. Fuller the bulk of the time, 4 minutes to answer the question so that we can keep the show going and cut down on any confusion, because that's not what we want. We don't want any confusion. So please, ma'am, please, sir, when you have a question, try to make it short and sweet so that Mr. Fuller can answer your question, because he does want to answer your question, but he has to hear and understand what you are saying. Okay, could you do that, ma'am? Could you do that, sir? Please. With that being said, Mr. Fuller, now is the time for you to speak about your book.
Yes, a lot of these questions are answered in one form or another. Many of them are not. In the textbook for victims of white supremacy that the listeners can get by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And in the textbook for victims of white supremacy, there's an area called Area 8, which is sex, for instance, and in dealing with the question that the previous caller raised. And a lot of these questions are answered in one form or another in the textbook for victims of white supremacy, the 8th area of activity, which is sex, out of the 9 areas of activity in alphabetical order. And that's the way the entire book is structured. And a lot of these questions are answered in the book. If you have the book, just turn to that section. If you're interested in something sexual or something that has to do with the sexual confusion that the racist spreads among non-white people, you'll find that in the area of sex, and you will find things that are not even in the area of sex that indirectly pertain to sex, because sex is politics. A lot of people don't look at it that way, but what is politics? Politics is any interaction between people. And even in religion, people will say, well, you don't want to get politics mixed up with religion. Well, then, what is religion and what is politics? Religion is a strong belief backed up by action. Religion is a strong belief backed up by action. And what is politics? Politics is any interaction between people. You're political. Being polite, the word polite has to do with interaction between people. Politics, polite, police has to do with interaction between people. So religion and politics are one and the same. You're interacting from a strong belief, if you have one, any kind of strong belief, but you're interacting with people. There never was a religion, I don't think, that didn't have something to do with people. People invented religion, so that's politics. But people will say, you don't get religion mixed up with politics. There's no way around it. And so what about the other areas of activity? Economics, education. Education is a part of religion. Religion is a part of sex. Sex is a part of religion. All the areas of activity. So what the white supremacists have done, they have commandeered all of the things that people think, say, and do who are classified as non-white and turned them into areas of activity that serve the system of white supremacy. That happened to the non-white people of the planet under the jurisdiction of the system of white supremacy, which is the dominant political and religious force of the planet Earth here in the year 2020. Now, the textbook for victims of white supremacy is supposed to be designed to help the individual non-white person to replace that system of white supremacy with the system of justice. And you can get it by going to producejustice.com. producejustice.com.
Okay.
Do's and don'ts.
Before
That's
we
all
get off,
everything is anyway. Do's and don'ts.
Before we get off of that, I checked on the producejustice.com website today, and then I even looked under the Carl Nelson Show. Are you scheduled, as far as you know, any time soon to be on the show? Because if you were, it wasn't posted on the page on the site today.
No, they usually let me know sometime, usually within 24 hours of when I will be. So that's why, I usually get a late notice because sometimes their schedule doesn't allow them to make anything right. So that's the Carl Nelson Show, 1450 AM, 95.9 FM, WOL Radio, regular radio.
Regular radio. Okay,
right.
And please remember, when you do get that notice, like you did it last time, let me know so that I can inform all the people on my page and all the people that contact me that you will be on, because they were listening and they did like the last time you were on there. So thank you very much, Mr. Fuller. Okay, I want to give a shout out to Jane Lance, Moon Pie, and Robert G. Robert G got me on this morning. I had a problem, but the Gatewood brothers they back Mr. Fuller and I up. Any technical problems or things that we have, they are on it. So I just want to say thank you to that. And Jane Lance is a good listener and wrote in. Okay, let's do this. We'll get 7 minutes here. Let's do this. Mr. Fuller, this comes from, who is this? This comes from, I guess, Carl. He says this. Are Black Greek fraternities and sororities constructive in the fight against white supremacy? He says that he hopes all is well, and he says we are still learning. I have a topic that I would like you to break down: Black Greek fraternities and sororities. Mr. Fuller, you are familiar with the Black Greek fraternity sorority system. And he says he wants your response. He says, are you familiar with that?
I am not familiar with them. I've never been a member or anything, or talked in depth with anyone who is a member of a fraternity or sorority about the subject of being in a fraternity or sorority. But I have heard things like there's an initiation that means that people would be given some type of mental or physical bodily harm, and I'll just go to what the code says about that. Doesn't make any difference what label it's under. You don't do harm to anybody.
Okay.
And so I'm saying any so-called organization of any kind, anywhere, should be an organization that builds a person up right from the first minute, the first second that the person, you might say, joins. Nothing unpleasant or nothing non-constructive should happen to that person. I mean, anything that, and I understand that the seeds of the existence of sororities and fraternities all within the system of white supremacy. So you back off and examine in fine detail everything that has this inception in the system of white supremacy, and see if there's any harm associated with it. Anything, any type of non-justice, any type of thing that's not going to build a person up or result in something constructive right from the minute. I mean, from the very minute. If it's an organization and you ask somebody to join that organization, wonderful things should happen right from the very minute that you're in it. Otherwise, why have it? You can get misery anywhere.
Yes, sir. He continues by saying, ask Mr. Fuller this: by applying the compensatory counter-racist code, are Black Greek fraternities and sororities constructive in the fight against white supremacy?
Well, now, that's something that people who are members of black sororities and fraternities should ask themselves. Are we set up to do anything against racism? Or what are we set up for? What is our mission? What is our ultimate mission? What is our primary mission? What is our subsidiary missions? Do we have? What are we existing for? In other words, it comes down to, if I want to join a fraternity, what do I want to join a fraternity for? See, why? Why am I joining a fraternity? It comes down to a what. How do I plan to join? They say, well, you got to go through an initiation and you got to take a beating. Well, wait a minute. I got to take a beating? I mean, I'm black. I've been taking beatings, forever, as long as I can remember. So what is this? I got to take a beating? Silence. I got to take a beating? For what? I was whipped. My grandfather was whipped. My great-grandfather was whipped. Here I am going to join a black organization, and you're telling me that I got to, somebody's going to line up, and I'm going to run through the crowd and get a beating? Silence. For what? Well, that's just the way we do. Oh, you what? You what? I'm looking at pictures of people put on slave ships and beaten all the way to the ship, and all while they're on the ship, being beaten, and come across a great ocean, being beaten all the way, and get to the other side of the ocean and continue to be beaten, horsewhipped. And then somebody says, hey, we got a Mecca over here for black people. It ain't much, but we do the best we can. It's an organization called a fraternity. But you got to get a beating to be a member. We need to think about that. After all these years of not thinking about it, according to the code.
Okay. All righty. There you go, Carl. And thank you for your question. Well, guess what? We have come to the end of the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. So we'd like to thank you for listening and thank you for your calls. We appreciate all of them. Don't forget, new rules are going to apply right now. So hopefully we will hear from you for next week's show. For those who have to stay or are going to stay tuned for the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. For those who have to go, have a good week. Be constructive. Stay focused. And we hope to hear from you next week. You've been listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. here on Blog Talk Radio and also at ProduceJustice.com. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Okay. Good morning and welcome to the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Contact numbers are 516-453-9921, or you can Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. I cannot promise you that it will get read. Those that you hear read are for those who have already submitted their Gmails and they are being read. Here's the thing about that. When they are read, I will give you the date and the time that your Gmail is read so that you may hear it or whatever you choose to do with that. Got new rules here. We're going to try to give a 5-minute rule. Here's the 5-minute rule basically. We're going to give you a minute to ask your question. If you have a VGQ and a question, try to limit your VGQ to 30 seconds and your question to 30 seconds. That way we can give Mr. Fuller at least 5 minutes to answer your question because, as you well know, he gives examples, and we don't want to cut him off from giving the examples or asking or answering your question. So please, ma'am, please, sir, be observant of the new rule, and then we can get the program moving. Keep it moving and answer as many questions as we can. All right. Hopefully we can get that done. With that being said, thank you for those who are in the chat room. With that being said, let's go all the way to the Midwest, and we have in the 586, I think it's Leona. Yeah, Midwest. Okay, Leona, I think you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
Greetings. Can I be heard? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Mr. Fuller, good morning, sir. Listen, I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate more on the counter-racist concept of stand by your work. And that, I mean that in the area of standing by your work in terms of thought, speech, and action, in terms of writing, in terms of video, what have you. The idea of standing by your work and why it's important. And, for example, when it comes to perhaps, if I'm going to quote from the code book or the basic text, I'm supposed to, I think the correct thing to do is to say that this work comes from Neely Fuller on page such and such from such and such book. And if I don't do that, do I not contribute to confusion and the system of racism, white supremacy? Could you please elaborate more?
The answer is yes. You're contributing to confusion, and the white supremacists, they will join in and help contribute to that confusion because they'll do the same thing. They will say things that other people said and stick their name on it. Or they will say something and stick anybody's name on it. The white supremacists will do that. So black people, victims of white supremacy, should not do that. That's code. Stand by your work. Every person should stand by his or her work. If Frederick Douglass makes a statement, Frederick Douglass should stick by the statement that he made, not make a statement. For example, Frederick Douglass make a statement that Booker T. Washington made and put his name on something that Booker T. Washington said, or vice versa. Booker T. Washington put his name on something that Frederick Douglass said. No. Put your name on something that you're saying, and if you're quoting somebody else, say who the somebody else is and the source of the material so that you don't cause what? Confusion. In counter-racist logic, it's called a stand by your work. Not only something that you say, but what you do. Don't do something and say that somebody else did it. Black people are kind of famous for that, too, particularly when they run around in what we call the hood, killing people, and then run and hide. No, you stand by your work. You kill somebody on that bus stop, you say, yes, I did it, and I was going, and if I have a chance, I'm going to do it again. That should be your basic attitude. According to what? According to the counter-racist logic. You call yourself worrying about George Floyd, but you don't think nothing of killing somebody right down from the block from you that you went to school with, and then hide and make it look like somebody else did it. No black person on the planet should ever do anything like that. Ever. You're bold enough to do it, be bold enough to stick by what you did. And if you want to say something, say you said it. If you're going to write a song and you write the song, put your name on it. And when somebody else asks about the song, somebody else should say, Well, I'm going to sing this song, and this song was not written by me. It was written by Irvin Berlin, a white man. But I'm going to sing this song because I think I put my spin on it in the way that I sing it. But the song itself, words and music, came from a person named Irvin Berlin. Or it came from Rodgers and Hammerstein. It's a song that they wrote. So I'm going to sing that song. And this song, another one I have here from a person named Ray Charles. And I'm going to sing that song. But Ray Charles wrote the song and recorded it in 1947. Now I'm going to sing it. Now that's clarity. That's non-confusion. Okay? You say, I'm singing the same song he sung, but I'm putting my spin on it. All right? And you tell people how much spin you put on it. And that's in a song. It's the same way when you write something or when you repeat something. And if you copy something that Neely Fuller said and put your name on it, that is what you call legally plagiarism. But I'm not even talking about the legal aspect. I'm saying, why did you do that? Mm-hmm. You should be able to explain to the world why you did that.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
you put
Leona.
something that somebody else said and put your name on it. Mm-hmm. Don't do that according to the code ever.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, Leona, for your call. As I tell everybody, do not be a stranger. You heard in the background the clock expired, so we got to keep it moving there. Okay, let's go here to England. This is Brother McCann. Says this. Dear Mr. Fuller, I've made observations from watching recent science fiction movies as well as listening to moguls Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. It seems to me that the elite classes within the white race are rapidly accelerating their plans to seek out new life and territory in the rest of the universe. Mr. Fuller, is it the case that the white race has subjugated the dark peoples of our planet to such an extent they are now bored? So they are now seeking out new life and territory in the universe to conquer for the purpose of fun, glory, and material benefit. What will that mean for black people who will be left on Earth? I believe that the white race will exhaust every vestige of natural resources on this planet, on our planet, in order to venture further out into space, and in doing so, they will turn Earth into a waste bin. Hence, the reason why climate change is such a big issue these days for many observers. I look forward to hearing your response. Kind regards, Anthony from London, England. Mr. Fuller?
According to the code, which is supposed to be based on logic and based on truth, it appears that everything that the white supremacists do is to embellish and add value to the system of white supremacy. So that means that everywhere they go, even 10 trillion miles away, they are looking for a way to pound themselves on the chest and say, I'm a white supremacist, and I'm here to execute my supreme being based on being white over everything that I see, particularly any creature that can be classified as a person. I definitely want to examine that creature, see if that creature qualifies for being white, in which case they will be my ally, my partner in crime, or if the person has color or the creature has color in its skin and could be classified as a person of color, to dominate and mistreat that person immediately, to let them know that I am a white supremacist and I have arrived here on this planet 40 trillion light years away. Because that's the white supremacist mind. Basically, I'm saying the white supremacists do not make a move unless it's going to build up the idea and the practice of the system of white supremacy, which is the only value that they really value. They don't value anything else. Everything else is just window dressing for the embellishment of the system of white supremacy. And the system of white supremacy is to make what? What is the purpose of it? It's to feel good. Feel good about what? About being a white supremacist. And you get out of it fun, glory, and material comfort. So the presumption is that if you're a white supremacist and you're traveling in outer space, you're basically looking for some people. Basically and hopefully that they will be people that can be classified as non-white. And so that you can then practice white supremacy over them. They've been out there in outer space for millions of years. You didn't know about them until just yesterday or whatever. And so you managed to get where they are. So you're just going to do more of the same of what you do here. Years ago, I made a speech, or presented the code, you might say, a presentation at NASA Space Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. And I told the people who are working there, who deal with space, NASA Space Center, Greenbelt, Maryland. And I said, if I recall correctly, to the people that work there, you shouldn't be working to go into outer space and find new planets if you're going to do the same thing there that you do here. And that's basically practice racism. You shouldn't go there with that. Leave everything out there in outer space just like it is, because you're not going to improve on nothing by carting all that stuff called racism that you got here dominating this planet and put it on another planet. That is not progress. And please don't do that. Don't make that trip for that purpose.
Okay. I wonder what the response was for that, but that's okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fuller. Okay, let's go here. I don't have a name here, but in the 815 area, there's a question here. Let's see if I can get you in here. Okay. Don't have your name up, but you had a question mark by you. Did you have a question for Mr. Fuller?
Yes. My name is Justin. I called before.
Okay.
But
okay, Justin.
I got a VGQ. I just want to say I got my book in a timely manner. But my question is, why do you advise against having children? I read that in the book. It says avoid having children or offspring.
Yes. That's just a suggestion. See, a lot of the things that are in the textbook for victims of white supremacy are just for you to think about and either do it or don't do it, depending on your circumstances. But I have offspring, so I'm advising people not to have offspring. I just put that in as a suggestion. The book is full of suggestions, and the book says that every suggestion should be examined according to your individual circumstances, not the people down the street or the people next door, but yours. Because I'm saying within the system of white supremacy, you are producing another prisoner of war. And you have to understand that. So I say you think about that before you produce a person and put them in this mess. But then after you think about it, you may decide, hey, the person I'm going to put in this mess is the person who is going to be solving this problem. Because I haven't solved it, and I'm in the middle of this mess. So I'm going to produce all of the people that I possibly can that can straighten out this mess, and I'm going to help them, put them on that path to think about straightening out this mess, because I won't be lasting long enough to do it. So I need them to do it, to come behind me and do it. So you can look at it that way, because that suggestion is in the code book too. See, so it's just a matter of getting black people to think individually, because that's something we have been trained not to do, to think as individuals. We've been trained by the white supremacists not to think as individuals, but as a herd. Why? Because it suits them. You just teach one black person, and have that black person go out and tell all the other black people the same thing. You got them all. That lessons you're having to teach each one the way you want your slaves to think. Just teach one slave and have that slave go and tell the rest of the slaves how to be a slave. Makes the white supremacist's job easier. So what the code book is about is pointing to the value of one person. That's changing the whole world. And you should be that person. Changing the whole world from what? From what it is to what it should be. That should be your mission, according to the code, as an individual. That way you don't always look around like black people have been trained to do to see how many other black people you got with you.
All righty. All right, my brother. Thank you for your call. Sorry I didn't get your name over here, but don't be a stranger. Okay, here we're going to do this. We got a couple of calls there, 3 people at least. Listen, these are the new rules now. We're going to give a 5-minute window. So if you have a question in VGQ, you're going to have to cut it down. If you're going to ask both, you have to do your question 30 seconds and then your VGQ 30 seconds. That way we will allow Mr. Fuller to give you 5 minutes to answer your question, because as you well know, he will use whatever examples that he needs to use to answer your question so that it eliminates confusion. So please, ma'am, please, sir, keep that in mind if you're going to do both of those so that Mr. Fuller can answer the question. So with that in mind, I'm going to get Lightning and then Byron and then Divatude. So let me see here. Lightning from Lanett, Alabama. Let me see here. Okay, I'm not going to necessarily say roll tide, but you are on.
Hey, roll tide, Mr. Bobby. Mr.
Yes,
Fuller,
sir.
how are you all today?
Good, sir.
Great. Mr. Fuller, I have a question first. I have been using your saying when people ask me how I'm doing, I say I'm still learning. And then they ask, what have you learned? I say, I learned how to be a universal person. Then ask that again and say, what are you learning? I'm learning how to destroy racism. And I asked that again. I was asked that question again. I say, I'm learning. And I asked, what did you learn? I said, I'm learning how to become a better human. What would you say would be the most constructive response to that question, Mr. Fuller?
And the question would be what now?
They ask me how I'm doing. I say I'm still learning. And then ask me, What have I learned or what am I learning?
That's what you do. You tell them what you're learning. You're trying to learn everything that will help things to be the way that they should be, because all over the world there are things that are not the way that they should be. There's no situation that is the type of situation it should be. None. No examples to go by. None. Zero. So you are trying to learn everything that it takes to make all things in all areas of activity the way that they should be. And that's an unknown quantity. Universal man and universal woman. If you're a male, you should be trying to become a universal male, a universal man, in tune with everything that is of constructive value anywhere in the universe. Nobody has done that. You're trying to do something that many people will say is impossible. But you say, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to do what people say is impossible. I'm going to give it my best effort. That's what I'm doing. That's why I'm learning. It takes a lot of learning to do that, to be the quality of person that a person should be. Every person. Meaning what? Maximum constructive in everything that you say and do. You have a maximum constructive effect on everything that you encounter. That's your aim. That's the way it should be. And then you can ask a question. Since they ask you a question, what should you be doing? Then you have what you call a constructive conversation.
Great. Thank you,
quickly. Yeah.
Love you.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Did you have a VGQ? Because you still got 2 minutes on the clock.
Okay. My VGQ is that Mr. Fuller, what you have presented with your counter-racist code book and the word guide is the best thing to me since sliced bread, because I think 17 million people got to view how confusing it can be when you try to understand white supremacy if you don't know how it works and what it is. Because that interview with Oprah, they used the word affirm and they used the word racism. And then basically, like you say, Mr. Fuller, call it what it is, white supremacy. And everyone would be able to understand what's going on. But we also got to see how powerful white supremacy is, because they would even eat their own children to protect white supremacy.
Okay. All right, Lightning. I don't have to tell you don't be a stranger because you call in, but again, don't be a stranger. Thank you very much for your call, brother. Okay, let me see if I can get down here. Byron, I'm going to try to get to you here if I can get this down to you. There we go. Let me see. Byron from the 530. Let me see here. Okay. Okay, Byron, you're on.
Yes, sir. Y'all can hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Yes,
Good morning, sir.
I enjoy the show. I enjoy listening. I appreciate y'all having me. It's really needed. But my question for you, Mr. Fuller, is with 6,000 immigrants coming in a day in the United States, what do you think the white supremacists have planned for black people in the year 2021?
With whom coming?
With 6,000 immigrants. With 6,000 immigrants coming in a day coming in a day in the United States, what do you think the white supremacists have planned for black people in the year 2021?
Well, here again, it's the same formula. The white supremacists, they've covered all the 9 areas of activity. So when it comes to what you call immigrants, white supremacists determine where non-white people go and don't go. They make the decisions. The people themselves who are trying to, quote, unquote, immigrate, make the decision to move from where they are to someplace else. But when they move, they have to get the permission, directly and indirectly, from the white supremacists if they're going to be moving on planet Earth. So the white supremacists determine who is going to be where. So what is it that white supremacists do? They practice white supremacy. So anytime you see any people of color moving anywhere, or anytime you see the white supremacists moving anywhere, it is for the purpose of giving greater strength to the system of white supremacy. That's what they do. They specialize in just that one thing. That's the most important thing to them. Why? Because it produces the three things that every creature in the universe wants: fun, glory, and material comfort. So you may not see it or recognize it for what it turns out to be. Initially, you may not ever see it at all. But if the white supremacists are involved in it, it's to give strength to the system of white supremacy, one way or another.
In some type of form or fashion.
Say that again?
No, I was agreeing with you. Like, in some type of form or fashion, they always like slowly integrate what they need to do, indirectly or directly.
Sure. And if it's non-white people they're moving in, sometimes it takes forever almost to figure out why they made that move. But it's one thing you know for certain, according to compensatory counter-racist logic. They did it to give greater strength to the system of white supremacy, because the white supremacists don't do anything that's going to damage the system of white supremacy.
Yeah, so they got it's a plan behind this.
Oh, yes, always. They don't do things without plans. They see to it that black people don't have plans. There's black people that jump up and down and stand on their head and make a lot of noise, but they don't have a plan for anything. And the white supremacists very carefully teach us to be that way.
Byron, down there in Texas.
That.
Down there in Texas, do you have electricity and water from where you from? It just said you're from Texas. Didn't say what city.
Oh, yes, sir. Oh, yeah. We never lost anything.
What part of Texas are you from, or city?
I'm 30 minutes outside of Houston.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, we never lost anything over here.
Okay. Good. Okay. Well, thank you for your call, my brother, and thank you for that update. All righty. And like I tell everybody, or try to, don't be a stranger. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller, for your answer. As a matter of fact, why don't we do this, since we're at the bottom of the hour? For everybody, you're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Now, to get in contact with the show, call 516-453-9921. And when you call that number, if you would like to ask a question, press the number 1 button. That's so that you can go get in line. And when they come to you, make sure that you give your name so that I can properly introduce you. And I will mess it up sometime, not on purpose, but I'm trying to correct it. I'm trying to get better on pronouncing, names and so forth. But I mean no disrespect for that. But give the call screener your name, and so I can, and maybe city if you want to, so I can forward that information to Mr. Fuller. So we thank you for doing that. If you Gmail me, you can do that by going to the numeral 7, MrBobby@gmail.com. And I can't guarantee that your Gmail will be read on today's program, but on a program, it will be read, and I will try to make sure that I give you the date and the time that your Gmail is read. And for those of you who have responded with that, thank you for that. And then I want to thank you in advance. The show is being, you can pick up the show here on blogtalkradio.com and also at producejustice.com. You can hear a replay of the show. You can do that. I have asked Mr. Fuller if he is on the Carl Nelson show. I personally do not know Mr. Nelson, but I do understand that when Mr. Fuller is on, I like to listen myself, so I've asked him to let me know when he knows that he's going to be on, and then I will let you know that he's going to be on. And I want to thank, I think it was 132 people who responded to the last time Mr. Fuller was on. They responded to that. Facebook let me know that were that many people that responded to that, and they were very delighted, to that. And also, you can hear the show in podcast if you missed it. Matter of fact, all of Mr. Fuller's shows, to my knowledge, you can play back and hear. Yeah, so that's good in case you missed something. So that's good also, because we all are still learning. Okay, with that being said, we have 29 minutes left in the show for today. And let me see if I can get this on here. Yes, going to the Gmails. This is from Divitude. Says this, Mr. Fuller. Says, I have a question for you, Mr. Fuller. I was listening to you explain what makes white people attractive, and you said it's not based on looks but what they do. White people mistreat black people, and we all see this. So, in essence, any non-white person that is attracted to white people is attracted to the fact that non-whites are being harmed. I've been in a situation where a black person is in a tragic arrangement with a white person, and the black person becomes hostile towards other black people, or the white person practices racism against another black person, and their black partner acts like they didn't see what just happened. So are non-whites simply attracted to white people because they have the ability to wipe out black people?
Well, and put in that context, the answer is yes. Anybody who is master over you, you are attracted to that person. That's just the way the mind works. You may not like it, but you are attracted to the person simply because of your situation. If I am in a prison, and that's why I keep using the prison example in this compensatory counter-racist codified talk that we have every week, I like to keep emphasizing more and more, and I'm asking everybody to do that. The prison analogy. If you are a prisoner of war, you are automatically attracted to your prison master. Why? Because just like animals are attracted to their masters, many of the people who are listening have creatures called animals in the form of dogs or cats. Your dog is attracted to you. Why? Because you're the source of everything. Even if you beat the dog, and you shouldn't, or you harm the kitten, which you shouldn't, but they still come around. Why? Because they are dependent. That's why. We are dependent on the white supremacists, whether we like it or not. We are born in their prison. We have never known anything outside of their prison. We have imagined things like heaven outside of the prison, but we have never been there that we can recall anyway. So all we have ever known is a prison called the system of white supremacy if you are a person with skin that says you are not white. Your prison uniform is your skin color. And so it doesn't make any difference what kind of title you have, or how you feel or what you think or what your plans are. In answer to the question, you are attracted to your prison master. And just imagine yourself as being in a prison yard, because that's what the whole planet is. If you're a person with color in your skin, you're in a big prison yard, and you walk around every day, and the prison master says, well, I want you to all of the people in this particular area, I'm going to fix it so you're going to come to me and ask me to let you migrate to a place, one of the places, and I have domination over all of the places that I have set aside to do this or that. I have factories here. I have farms here or whatever. So, you're going to come to me as one of my prisoners and ask to be transferred to one of the other cell areas, concentration camps, which is what the whole world is for every person who is classified as black. The whole world is a big concentration camp, and you are a prisoner of war, whether you recognize it or not. But you have to get permission from your prison master. That makes the prison master attractive. You have to go looking for the prison master and say, Master, can I go here? Can I go there? Can I get a passport? Yes, Bwana. No, Bwana. Maybe so, Bwana. Whatever you say, Bwana. That's how you have to talk. Because the prison master attracted you to him or her. And they hold all the cards for everything that you do. Now, there are some black people who say, oh, no, I'm master of my own fate. Yeah, when it comes to one thing, you can kill yourself. You can do that anytime you get ready. Just like the princess said. She was thinking about doing it after she got disappointed about somebody's behavior. According to what I saw on television, I think I heard her say that, she became suicidal. See, but the white supremacists decide whether you're going to be suicidal, because they know how to make a situation where you might be suicidal. And they definitely make situations all the time when you want to kill somebody. And they know how to handle that, too, because they usually arrange it so that black people do an excellent job every day of killing each other. And that's because we find them attractive, whether we like it or not, because that's where everything is, all over the world as we speak right now, and talk about this subject. There are people with color in their skin who have one question in mind, brushing past all the other black people who are supposed to be so wise, and saying, which way did the white people go? Let me out of here. Let me get away from all these other people that look like me, because they are nothing but trouble. Every time they come toward me, it's nothing but trouble. Every time I go toward them, it's nothing but trouble. It seems like we don't know how to manufacture anything except problems. Let me out of here. Let you out of here and go where? Where are you attracted to now? I'm attracted to wherever the white people are, because that's the only way that I'll find any kind of way to get a little bit of sanity, or a little bit of rest, or a little bit of food, or a little bit of something that amounts to something. I want to get away from this virus. Well, you better go looking for some white folks, or you're going to still be in trouble.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Mr. Fuller, for that. Before we move on, there was something that was in there very quickly for those who are new to the program. Could you quickly explain, Mr. Fuller, what is a tragic arrangement?
A tragic arrangement, there's a lot of them. Our entire interaction with white people, my interaction with white people, is a tragic arrangement. Why? Because I'm a prisoner of war. I can't interact with white people except in that status. So what I specifically say in the area of sex is a tragic arrangement is when a non-white person is having sexual intercourse with a white person in the system of white supremacy. If they weren't in the system of white supremacy, which is a fantasy, then it would just be person meets person. Male with female, if you're talking about sex.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But if you're having sexual intercourse with a non-white person and you are a white person, that is a tragic arrangement in the system of white supremacy. Why? Because it's in the system of white supremacy. That's why.
Okay. All right. Got that in there. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I have 4, and then here. This question here, Mr. Fuller. And I got 5 things to do. This comes from, Okay, anyway, here it is. It says, Mr. Fuller, I recently received my code book and word guide, and I'm in the process of learning how to codify my life. Thank you very much for these writings and your weekly show. I have great appreciation and admiration for you and your work. According to the code, it is my understanding that one of the white supremacists' favorite tools are racial buffers. What would be the codified response to these racial buffers and their anti-black behaviors?
You immediately go to, in a practical sense, and everything in the code is supposed to be practical. You go to the page 171, page 172 of the 4 wants. You ask, first of all, these questions of yourself. What do I want to do? Why do I want to do it? How do I plan to do it? And what do I expect the constructive result to be? When you're talking to someone else, you ask the same question.
Okay.
What do you want to do? Everybody wants to do something every day. Every not only every person, but every animal, every creature, every bird, every ant wants to do something every minute that it is awake and what you call alive. So those 4 questions apply everywhere, all the time, no exceptions to the time. 2 o'clock in the morning, anytime. On a mountaintop, anytime. Up under the ocean, anytime. Creatures want to do something. Whales want to do something. Sharks want to do something. The albatross that flies over the ocean, it wants to do something every minute. So What do you want to do? Just ask the person, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? How do you plan to do it? Because if you want to do it, you must have some plan, or you're working on a plan. And then the last question, the most important one, they're all important, but this is most important. What do you expect the result to be? When you get lost, when you get confused, when you get kind of frustrated about how you talk to people and how they're talking to you, always go to those 4 questions.
Yes, sir.
They'll take everybody right. The answers will take everybody right where they ought to be, whether they want to go or not.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Let's go to the 8:15. Justin, you got the 5-minute rule in, and you are on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
I didn't push the button, but I can ask another question. In your book, you say avoid borrowing from other non-whites, avoid lending to other non-whites. Why is this?
Minimize conflict. You minimize contact with people, you minimize conflict. The less contact you have with people. This is why people who love trouble love to go somewhere where there are a lot of people. You have the greatest potential for starting some mess if you are a type of person that's got a reputation of being a mess starter. One thing that really agonizes a person who likes what you call mess is not to be around other people. You cut them off from being around other people, they go crazy. Because that is their lifeblood. And they love mess. So, you know, what we say in the hood, you know, they like mess. So what does a person do who likes mess? Go around people. And they go around, sometimes they go around and just eyeballing. I mean, looking to see, you know, who is most vulnerable to what kind of mess you're going to get ready to start. Okay? And they always want to be around other people. So if you want to minimize conflict among black people, like this virus is causing some black people to stay away from other black people, you're killing them, particularly the mess starters. Man, they'll go crazy. I mean, you know that instinctively. You know who starts mess. Everybody, you know, and because mess starters like to have a reputation for starting mess. Okay, they usually die from the mess they started too. But, you know, but they don't care about that. They don't think about that or don't want to think about it. But how you minimize conflict by minimizing unnecessary contact. Every contact you make with everybody, white or non-white, should have something in mind. You should have something in mind that's going to produce a constructive result. Otherwise, don't make the contact. That's code.
All righty. Thank you, Justin. And do not be a stranger. Let's go to the 972, and that's Bobby with an I. Okay, Bobby, you are now on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning to you both. Mr. Fuller, I understand that it was the Little Rock 9 crisis that prompted your interest in the race problem. And we all know that there were 9 black students who were trying to enroll in Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I think that was back in 1957. There were other incidents prior to 57 that black people were faced with. My question is, 57. Yes, sir. My question is this: what was it in particular about the Little Rock 9 crisis that made you want to solve the race problem?
Because I was isolated and had time to think about it, for one thing. I was on a mountaintop in Wajima, Japan, and it was called what you call a hardship assignment. I was in what you call the Air Force, and I was in the supply section, and there was nowhere to go, nothing to think about, and, you know, and everything quiet most of the time, dead quiet. And so you have time to think. I think that's why a lot of people write books when they're in prison, because that's the first time they haven't been around, in some prisons that is, total chaos, because prisons are kind of structured. And some of them, you spend a lot of quiet time, from what I've heard. So being in that particular situation on what they call an isolated radar site up in the mountains, it's just the clouds and the birds and the mountains and the mist and quiet that will drive you crazy. So you use your mind more in that type of setting. So I could see things clearer than I had seen before about the Little Rock 9, because we were picking up information on a transoceanic radio. It was kind of a lot of static, but every now and then, depending on how high up we were, and usually on a radar site, back then you were kind of high up. They would build them at the top of mountains. In fact, I could look down on the clouds. I was so high up sometimes. So I was listening to the transoceanic radio talking about the Little Rock 9, and I said to myself, this thing about color is not only in Little Rock, Arkansas, it's everywhere. It's all over the world. I've always thought that, but I didn't think about it in depth. And then how deep does it go? And how wide is it spread? And how much does it affect everything? And I started thinking at that broad level. Then I said, oh my goodness, I'm right in the middle of it, regardless of where I am, because it's everywhere. The white supremacists have spread it all over Japan. And so they're doing it in Little Rock, Arkansas. And there's no such thing as running into racism. You're born in it. And then when that idea hit me, everything came together instantly. The system of white supremacy. It jumped out at me in bold letters. I didn't have the words for it then, but I could see the concept. I say, this is a world system, and it dominates every move that I make, every breath that I take. All the cornflakes that I want to eat are dominated by white supremacy. Everything that I think that I want to do, every place I think I want to go, is dominated by people with white skin who are determining everything that I think is important. And when it all came together, I said, I got to take notes on how to deal with this, because this is big. This is much bigger than I thought. This is not racism, and it has to do with 4 or 5 white guys, half drunk, using the N-word and calling it out to me while they wave their beers in the air from that beer tavern across the street while I'm walking down a certain street in Memphis, Tennessee. Because that was the way that I had a tendency to think of racism. It's something you run into every now and then. I said, I'm drowning in racism. I was born in an ocean of racism, and I've never known anything but racism. Even the things that I want to do are soaked in racism. Every idea I ever had has its roots in racism. And it hit me, talking about myself. So that's when I started writing the first 6 pages of the code about how to deal with it. And that's how it got started. 1957, the Little Rock 9. I saw Elizabeth Eckford being taunted by a young white girl. I say white woman, because if you're white and you're a female, you're a woman to a black person when you're 5 years old or 1 year old. You're a woman. You're full grown if you're white in the system of white supremacy. If you're a black female anywhere on the planet, you're a girl. You never become a woman. Why? Because of the system of white supremacy. They guarantee you're not going to be a woman, ever. You're just going to be a big girl. That's all. That's part of the system and the poison of white supremacy. But that was where my inspiration really started in earnest, because you might say inspiration, but you might say it's even resignation, because I had to resign myself to the fact that I'm born in a racist system that has no boundaries. There ain't no such thing as getting out of it. There's no place to go. It's supreme over every move that I make. So my job is to replace it with a system of justice, because that's the only reasonable, logical thing to replace it with. So I started writing.
Okay. All righty. Thank you very much, Bobby. Let's go, John. Don't be a stranger, by the way. Let me do this here. John from Houston, we only got 5 minutes, so we got to do this quickly here. John, you are on. Go ahead, please. John? Okay. Tell you what, John, since we can't get you on here, tell you what, you call back next week. They got your number on the screen here. we will put you right up front first if you call in, because evidently we don't have time to get your question in here. Okay. For the rest of you, thank you for your kind words, your thoughts, your questions. For Mr. Fuller, let me do this. Mr. Fuller, while we have the remaining few moments, speak about your book for about 2 minutes here, sir.
Yes, you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. And someone commented, a couple of people commented this morning, that it's one of the best things they've read. But I like to tell people, and I'd like, definitely, the code requires me to tell the truth. The book that I have written are some of the worst, two of the worst written volumes, I think, in counter-racist science. But I did the best I could. But I think that I could have done a much better job of writing. I'd like to have written at the 5th grade level. And I don't know what level I did write at. I just explained a lot of things, and when I look at it, I could have done it better. And so I said, the Word Guide and the Basic Book, the 2016 edition particularly, are two of the worst written counter-racist guides that anybody could ever write. That's just the way of writing, the way I wrote it. I hope not. I try to think that I did my best, which I did do. But I think that if I just had the time, I saw my time running out. I'm way up in age, and I had to get them out in the form that they're in. But over the long run, I wanted to be on the record that they are two of the worst written counter-racist guides that I think that a person can write. But they are two of the best of the worst. And I'd like to emphasize that. They are two of the best of the worst written counter-racist guides that you will probably encounter in your existence. But I do say that I want people to get them anyway, because I think they are helpful, either directly or indirectly.
Yes, sir.
And by going to producejustice.com.
All righty.
And the books are addressed to the individual person about how to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. That's the core purpose.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. John from Houston in the 832, call back next week, and I'll make sure that you get up front. And this other person in the 252 area, which didn't leave a name, you call back again next week, and I will make sure, or try to make sure that you get up here maybe after John, because John is up here first. Okay, thanks everybody for listening. Forgive me for the mistakes that I've made. We try not to, but we're going to make mistakes, but we're trying. We'll do better the next time. Thank you for calling. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, everybody, technicians, everybody involved. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you or speak to you next week. Mr. Fuller, thank you.
And I give thanks.
All right. Everybody have a blessed week.
ProduceJustice.com.